You're listening to The Seed, brought to you by Staley Credit Union and the Brecknitz Group of Raymond James.
Welcome to The Seed. I am Laura Richter, producer for the podcast, sitting in for host Julie Staley for a special Halloween edition. I am joined by my friend, historian, and Haunted Decatur tour guide, John Winterbauer. John, how are you tonight?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm in the season for hauntings.
It is that time of year.
It is. And as you know, Staley Films has been working on the documentary Fields of Gold, the A.E. Staley story. But what we want to talk about tonight are some of the locations that actually still exist from the time that Mr. Staley lived in Decatur and the haunted stories that surround them.
Ooh,
and I know that you know plenty of stories. As a matter of fact, Decatur is probably one of the most haunted towns in Illinois.
Yeah. I'd say that's accurate.
And even on your tour, which you give on the weekends in October, you can't possibly cover all of the locations that are actually haunted.
Absolutely not.
But there is a book, I think, that's written about Haunted Decatur.
Haunted Decatur by Troy Taylor, historian Troy Taylor. He wrote it in 94 and he's updated it a couple of times. And now it's several hundred pages of just haunted history in Decatur.
Well, it's amazing. I've been on your haunted tour. Of course, I have an interest in, a ghost enthusiast, if you want to say that. And there's just amazing locations and amazing stories that we're going to share tonight. Actually, we are streaming from the Hoagland Center for the Arts in Springfield. That's where the Spencer Films office is located. It so happens that this facility was a Masonic temple. And I know the Masonic Temple in Decatur played a very important part in Mr. Staley's life. He was a Mason. He dedicated a lot of his efforts and even financially supported the building of the most recent Masonic Temple that still stands.
Right.
And I think that temple was built in 1929.
Correct.
And since that time, there's been some interesting activity that you can tell us about.
Oh, there's been a lot of it. And the thing with hauntings is we don't know sometimes how they start, but the legend has it, a church donated the property to the Masonic Temple to build the Masonic Temple. And they say that it was built on the churchyard. And churchyard to me implies graveyard, although we can't confirm that. I've never actually confirmed that. That's the story we were told. And like most of Decatur, they didn't move the bodies when they moved the graveyards to other locations. So that's the legend that rolls. I don't know how accurate it is, but from the beginning of the building's history, there are ghost stories. One of them talks about an electrician that died during the construction, electrocuted himself. And he might be the first ghost. I don't know his name, but
that's interesting. Well, we know that whenever something's built on top of a cemetery or bodies, it poltergeist taught us
that's
that.
right. That's bad mojo. You don't want to do that.
So you think this electrician still haunts or resides or visits?
It's a theory. That's what we were told in the initial investigations of the building, is that this man had been electrocuted and they believed that his ghost was there. Now, it could be somebody else, could be they're just trying to tie it to an event. But that's the long-standing story. And I don't know his name, so I can't research that. But it makes sense. But wouldn't that be terrible to spend eternity at work? I think that'd just be awful. Even in that magnificent building, that would be a terrible way to spend eternity.
I love my job, and I'd be good with ghosting around Spencer Films for the eternity. So,
well, you're in the performance center. You could go see shows.
That's true.
That guy's just at the Masonic Temple.
Now, I've actually been to the Masonic Temple.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time there researching as well as visiting. And I will say there is definitely a vibe in parts of that building. One part, I was coming out of a ladies' restroom and swore there was somebody in that foyer with me. Mm-hmm. And I know even the Masons today, if you have an opportunity to visit there, will tell you of hauntings that happen. And I think most recently, what I know of is that there was vandalism in the building. Mm-hmm. And I talked to one of the Masons who spent the night. There wound up being a group of Masons that went because I think the doors maybe were
broken open.
Yeah, were broken open. So they spent the night there, and they told me they heard piano music playing. They were in the auditorium,
right.
Which anybody
magnificent room.
It's beautiful,
Yeah.
but they were in the auditorium and heard piano music playing in the building, couldn't find the source. And also at the top of the balcony where all the seats are, the doors opened
Oh,
and they're
wow.
locked. And that
Yeah.
was, I mean, they were actually very, very spooked by what was going on. Other stories you've heard?
The guy that what they call him, fish man, fish face.
Oh, fish face.
Yeah, fish
Yeah.
face. Because his eyes are buggy and he looks like a fish, which is odd to me. I don't know what that kind of human being would look like, but that's what they call him. And he walks down they see him walking down the hallway. No one knows who that guy is. That's the thing with the Masonic Temple. It could be dang near anybody. I mean, the Masons have a long storied history. There are hundreds of people involved in the Masonic fraternity there, so it could be any of those guys just coming back to hang out. Um, but the fish guy is fairly interesting to me because they just describe him that way, so that's what they call him. I think he might be hanging around because he's mad. Why are you calling me fish face?
It could be, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's even been seen on the theater inside the
Yeah,
auditorium.
he's been seen inside the auditorium and out in that hallway that would be to the east side of the building. But yeah, and that's the story with him. And who are they? I don't know. The stories aren't we haven't been able to identify any of these people, so we have no stories to go with them. But they are attached to the building. They are still seen regularly. The building's had some damage, some water damage, so it's in some straits.
Right.
Hopefully they get that resolved. And renovating haunted places tends to stir up the activity. So if they get the money going to fix their problems, the fish man might make some regular appearances.
He might
again.
appear. I mean, they were doing
Yeah.
activities, I know, prior to the water damage,
Right.
and yeah, like I said, I had the opportunity to visit some of the rooms in there, and it's
Mhm.
again, it's a beautiful location. I hope that they're able to save the Masonic Temple, and
they're trying diligently to do that. The people that have it are working hard. So hopefully they get some community support and get the funding to do that, because it's a building that needs to stay.
it
So,
does. I agree. And, talking about community support, there is a business in Decatur that supports this podcast and also supports, obviously, Decatur and other locations, and that is the Staley Credit Union. What if you owned your bank? Join Staley Credit Union and you will. When you're a credit union member, profits come back to you, not investors. How? Think lower interest rates on loans, higher dividends on savings, financial education, and unmatched member services. Become a member today. Visit staleycu.com. This institution is not federally insured by Member Choice, proudly insured by American Share Insurance. So we thank the Staley Credit Union for sponsoring us. And let's move on and talk about another location in Decatur that is beautiful. I've not had the chance to actually visit the inside. I've been to the outside of it many times, and that's the old Wabash Depot.
oh yeah,
What can you-
magnificent building.
Yeah, and of course, the railways, the railways played a very important part in Staley manufacturing, which
Right.
makes sense. And if I'm not mistaken, Decatur was a hub for railroads during its prime
Right.
days.
Decatur was one of the major railroad hubs between Chicago and St. Louis. Decatur was it. Wabash and Illinois Central, right there in the area known as the Levee.
Mhm.
The Wabash was 1901 to 1981. So the number of people that came into town on the railroads was enormous for a long time. And with Staley doing what they did, it was a constant 24-hour a day thing. And that has left its mark. There are what they call residual hauntings, which is just film loops playing over and over again, or audio loops playing over and over again. And that happens there a lot. They hear people talking and footsteps, and they hear bells clanging and all kinds of stuff that's not actually there. It's just imprints of a sort. The freight depot down at the west end of the station, we believe was haunted by a man named Joe Ricketts, who in 1905 was a freight agent there, who was murdered right there on the grounds. And another guy spent an eternity at work, but he's said to walk through there and into the building. And I've talked to people that claim to have seen him. So you never know. I've not seen him yet, and he's one I'd like to see. And then the yards, the Wabash yards out behind, which used to be a really busy place and a really dangerous place to work, have a spook light. You familiar with spook lights?
I actually am.
Yeah, they're just a ball of light. In this case, it's orange, about the size of a soccer ball that people have seen floating. I've seen it floating around the yard out there. In 1936, there was 1935, a man named Omer Davenport, who was head of security out there, who was killed, shot. And the legend says that ball of light is his flashlight as he's wandering around. You find these things all over the place in rail yards. It's probably a naturally occurring thing, but it really happens. And it's kind of a cool thing to see. The train spotters, the people that sit down there to watch the trains, they see it all the time. So that's still going on. The Wabash is a cool place, and they've done a great job. When we started these tours back in the 90s, um, we were telling people they're going to knock that building down, take pictures, and the people that have it now, God love them, because they saved a huge part of Decatur history, and it's a great place to visit. So go inside.
It's still open?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah, and they've got, I don't know, hundreds of booths, all kinds of cool stuff. I find all kinds of things in there. So go if you haven't been.
Oh no, I
Yeah.
need to. I love antique malls anyway,
Yeah.
and the vibe there too. When you're
Yeah.
talking about ghost stories, it seems like there's always, as you
You,
mentioned,
you can
residual.
tell, yeah, you can tell it was a train station too. They still got names on the doors, the offices, and it's cool. It's definitely worth checking out, and you feel it. I'm not claiming to be a psychic or anything like that, but um, you can feel the weight of history in that building, and that again is residual energy more than anything. I don't think there's any specific person just wandering around at any given time, but I think the past plays itself out there quite a bit. So
Yeah, and we're going to talk about another business that supports Decatur as well as our podcast. At the Brecknitz Group of Raymond James, you'll find a team of professionals with more than 250 years of combined experience, offering steadfast guidance for families, individuals, businesses, and institutional investors. Their powerhouse of experience is supported by the award-winning resources of Raymond James, one of the largest independent financial services firms in the country. For more information, visit thebrecknitzgroup.com. That's the BRECHNITZ group.com. Brecknitz Group of Raymond James, a financial future backed by strength and stability. So, John, there's another place in Decatur that I'm really fascinated with, and I haven't mentioned, but I actually do paranormal investigating myself, and that's the Avon Theater.
oh yeah,
And the Avon Theater was built in
1916.
1916, which would have been during the era of the Staleys. But it is still, not only does it still exist, but it is a movie house. Has
Correct.
it always been a movie house?
It was built specifically to be. It was the first building in Decatur built specifically to be a movie theater. Decatur was a theater town. I mean, there were a lot of theaters. The Lincoln Theater still stands and is under renovation. But across the street from where the Avon is on Water was the Empress Theater. There were several other theaters in town, not movie theaters. And the investors at that time were told, movies are a fad. They're never going to last. And here we are in 2022, and that's what's left is the Avon. And it went through some hard times, but it was purchased by the Constantopoulos brothers, who ran a candy shop in the Empress, incidentally, in 1924. So if we're tying it to A.E. Staley, let's assume he went to see films at the Avon because
Sure.
he was able to, and it was a showplace then. Looked a lot different than it does now, with original artwork and statuary, and it was something to see, and it's still standing, and it's haunted by Gustav Constantopoulos. How's that for a name?
There you go.
Gust Constant, as he Americanized it. He came back to work. Now, there's a guy who probably came back to work on purpose. Once he retired, and another company, another firm from here in Springfield, took over and destroyed it. In his mind, the renovations that they did are what you see now, and he was not pleased with that at all. So in his mind, he destroyed their theater. They destroyed his theater. He came back to work and started letting them know in subtle ways, like knocking things over and destroying, equipment, things like that. And he's been there ever since. And the people that work there are our good buddy Skip Houston, who is, by the way, the father of the Haunted Decatur Tours.
Right.
Troy wrote the book, and Skip said, "You ought to do a tour." And the first year they did, they didn't figure anybody'd come, so they said, "We'll do it for free." And they turned away hundreds of people. It was pretty hysterical. But Skip owns it now and has done a great job of bringing it back to life and keeping it alive. The legendary Avon girls, all of them have had experiences with Gus Constant, and he doesn't mean any harm. He's just watching over his theater. I've seen him. I know a lot of people have seen him. Skip, maybe I shouldn't say, maybe we shouldn't record this for prosperity, but I'm going to anyway.
Okay.
So Skip didn't really know whether he believed it or not when he went in that afternoon, a dark and stormy afternoon, as it turns out. He'd gone in to get letters for the marquee. He was the only person in the building, upstairs in a hallway, in a room in the hallway upstairs getting letters. And he turned and there was an old man standing in the door. And Skip thought he was real and said, "Sir, you can't be here." And the guy turned and took a couple of steps and disappeared. And so did Skip out the front door. That was his first meeting with Mr. Constantopoulos. And he's seen him several times since, but he's a good guy. He's a good ghost. Not a problem.
He's been actually spotted by other people that have visited the movie theater as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's been spotted on the tour. There's a night, a legendary Haunted Decatur night. Skip was doing the tour that night, and it was storming, and we just brought everybody inside and sitting in the theater and looked up, and there was a man standing in the balcony. And when they went up to investigate to see who it was, the guy just disappeared, and everybody split. And to this day, I don't know what year that was, but to this day, people still come up to Skip and go, "Hey, I was on the tour that night," and we know what night that is. It was great, man.
That is great. Well, these are just a few of the stories that you have to share for Decatur.
We do a 4-hour tour on the Ghost Hunters tour is a 4-hour tour, 3-hour to the general public tours. And we could do 6.
Easily.
Buy the book. I'll plug Troy's book, Haunted Decatur. It's a American Hauntings Inc. INK, AmericanHauntingsInc.com. You can get your own copy of Haunted Decatur signed by Troy Taylor, which makes it worth like $9 more on eBay. So,
Well, and I want to mention too, the Haunted Decatur Tour, unfortunately for those of you that are tuned in, is sold out for the rest of the season.
Yes.
But you mentioned Troy Taylor, and this tour is part of American Hauntings.
Right.
And there's tours that are given all around the country, as well as ghost hunting investigations overnights, if you want to call it. So they can check, anybody can check that out and see what's going on if you've got an interest in the paranormal.
It's all on the website. Yep.
It's all on the website. And this is certainly the time of the year to do it. So, John, thank you for being with us and
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, sharing some spooky stories. They believe that the Hoagland here is haunted too, especially on the 3rd floor. I've had my own experience. So it's a pleasure. This time of year, it's always good to talk about these things. So anyway, we hope that you will join us for the next Seed podcast, which will be November 1st, Tuesday. Julie Staley will be back talking to you. And again, we want to thank you, John, for being here.
Sure.
And thank all of you for tuning in to The Seed.